Hi, it's Lainy here from Achievement for All, and my guest today is Kathryn James. Kathryn does some work for Achievement for All, but also has a background in mental health and actually has many arrows to your bow. You do an awful lot of interesting things, Kathryn. But today what we wanted to talk about was more to do with mental health, mental well-being, really. You may have seen a video that Suzanne Wells and I did, and we were talking just generally about sort of routines, getting used to working from home. But of course, we were talking about it from the perspective of kind of choosing that lifestyle, and we had time to get used to it. Why I invited Kathryn is because I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of people haven't chosen this and pretty much got thrust into working from home from very busy, buzzy environments where they were in contact with a lot of people all the time, every day, and suddenly they're at home in their own environment and could be quite isolated, and it could be quite different now, the environment you're in, to the one that you were when you were at work. So Kathryn, we were sort of having a brief conversation, weren't we, about how different that is from when you choose it. What do you think the main things are for people when they've been thrust into it almost overnight?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this. I mean, as somebody who has been a home worker for a while, you know, and went from kind of working, going to an office and working, and then being home working, you know, I kind of have learned a lot about how that works for us. And the thing that I kind of come up, a thing that really has struck me, and I guess is what I would say, is I don't think there is a one size fits all. You know, there's some very sound advice out there, as you said, and you and Suzanne talked about it, about the need to kind of keep a routine and make sure you eat well and exercise. But actually, I think sometimes it's about, you know, I'm not a routine person, so the thought of setting up a routine is like, so I think for me it's about standing and pausing for a moment. This is a time when I think we can actually, you know, unless you're on the front line, of course, but for us, it's that time when you can just sit and reflect and sort of think, do you know what is it that works well for me and my life, and how do I make it work best for me and for those around me? And I think that, you know, one of the things that struck me is that we have a life before the coronavirus. Yeah. Now we have a life during it, and there will be a life after it, won't there? Yes. And each of those things are going to be different. And for me, for instance, one of the things about pre-coronavirus was, and it's really struck me, is like how fast we live our lives, don't we? Absolutely. Rush to appointments, rush with deadlines, rush to do this, you know. And for me, I do a lot of travelling, sitting on trains. And then suddenly you're thrust into this and you're kind of thinking, well, what was that about? Why did we do all of that? Why did I get onto this kind of treadmill? And did I need to travel as much? And, you know, technology has been amazing, isn't it? It has. Now. Yeah,
and I think lots of us have used that a lot, haven't we? We used it a lot more, even just keeping in contact with friends. You know, just absolutely. And I think people have been contacting a lot more than maybe they were used to.
Absolutely.
It's funny what you've just said. A friend of mine rang me very early this morning, and she just wanted a quick catch up about something, and we came away with that same feeling of, actually, there's some things in our lives we might not want to put back there.
Exactly, absolutely. I totally agree. I think we have to kind of like recognise and thank goodness this happened now than say 10, 15 years ago, you know, when we were still on a BlackBerry or something, and now we've got this and we've got Zoom. So I think it's about thinking about what was it in my previous life that I valued and I want to keep on doing and I want to get back to. What is it about this that I think actually this is working well for me? And then nobody knows what it's going to be like post-COVID, do we? We have absolutely no idea. But I think if we can, it's not going to be the same. And I think if we can start to kind of think about what matters to us, that gives us a better position to start shaping that, doesn't it? And
it does.
You know, I should imagine there might be some people who might make some quite radical life-changing decisions. Some of them might get forced upon them, obviously. But actually, I think this is a time of reflection, personally.
Yeah, and I think some colleagues in education have already started saying, actually, I could do more online or use more technology with my learners than I was before, and that's really interesting. I certainly, even in the bits and things that I'm doing, I've been thinking, actually, I could do more online. I don't necessarily need, as you say, to rush around on a train or a bus or be driving, and there is a balance, because I'm quite a social person, so I like to be with people. And as you said, it's about what's right for you. And if you do take a step back, I think, yes, I do like being with people, but I also like not being in a rush and not herring all over the place. Yeah. There's a calmness now that wasn't there before. And doing this and talking to somebody over one of these technologies seems more peaceful in a way.
Yeah, but I think that's interesting, because actually it's also, we are using technology more, but I think we've got to think also about how do we use technology. So interesting you said a friend phoned you early morning, because prior to this I had a friend phone me who I don't think I've spoken to for 2 years.
Right.
We worked together, and suddenly, I don't know, he just suddenly thought Cornwall, and he thought, oh, Kathryn, and he just gave me a phone, and he was talking about his daughter, who's 14 and in school, and her teachers have been putting lessons online, and actually, without being mindful about what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that, not mindful about how, if you do something in a lesson, if you're used to face-to-face, you've got something in a lesson, you suddenly think, oh, that will fill half an hour. And then not understanding how much, if you ask something to do, how much time that might take them to do.
Yeah.
What resources they've got at home, how they're feeling about having to do something in isolation. So this poor young woman is now spending more hours than she ever did at school online trying to get her coursework done. So 5 hours for an art lesson, for instance.
Right.
And I think there is something about, we have to be more considered, if you like, about our use of technology. So I have already converted some of my face-to-face training to online, for instance. So one of the things we do is that, when you do face-to-face training, you're there early and you welcome people in. I do that with Zoom, know, and they kind of come along, we'll sort out your technology. We do a kind of round of introductions. We do a bit of a kind of like, okay, so it's your first time using this technology. Let's try something simple and interactive together, like a poll. Let's do some breakout rooms, and actually thinking about it in a way which makes technology humane.
Yes.
Yeah. And then this session is a really good example, isn't it? I could have sat here and said, right, well, I'm just going to read from something, it's really flat. But actually, we're going to have a conversation, aren't we? And that's far more humane and real and natural and engaging.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the thing, is I think if you're not used to technology, you may be drawn into that. I've got to sit there and look professional, and I must talk to the screen, and I must, and you become sort of robotic in a way, don't you? And I know, because I've done lots of research now with sort of people that are doing sort of YouTubes and things, that actually they're all saying that kind of more natural, just be yourself. Just engage people like you would do normally. And the whole thing about the webinars, I was talking to a group of people, a group of scientists actually, that are now putting all of their stuff online onto webinars. And that we were talking about that whole kind of etiquette and what does it mean to be online, and giving those few minutes, like you said at the beginning, and making sure everyone's technology's working. And so I think there's going to be a lot of learning.
Oh, absolutely. And people get fixated by the learning about the technology, don't they? About what do I press for this, or where do I do that?
Yeah.
And get the pedagogy. And I would say the pedagogy is the important thing. The technology is just an enabler, isn't it?
Yeah, because you have to get your audience engaged with you if you're training them, which many teachers are, aren't they? Lots of schools, lots of colleges have been doing this. Some of them have been using things like Google Classrooms and sending work home. They've all done very different things, I think. But I'm going to go back to something you said, because I think this is really interesting, and it's just rung a bell with me, and it's been going around my head since you said it, about making your environment right for you. And I'm very aware that even just sort of some of my colleagues, we're all very different. So I live with a teenage boy. So my son is here and it's just the two of us. You were saying that it's just you and your partner. But some people have got some young children running around them. But I also know someone who is completely living alone. They don't have a garden. There's no green space. So they're sort of boxed in their flat. So actually, to make an assumption that this is a great idea, why don't you go away and do my wisdom? Actually, it's not great, is it? I've seen lots of people doing things at the moment that said, right, now make sure you do this, and this. But actually, what you're saying from a mental health perspective is actually to keep yourself mentally well, or in well-being. It's actually look at yourself, isn't it? Look at your environment.
Yeah, I think. As a family, particularly if you've got several people working from home, there's got to be that kind of discussion, hasn't there, about how do we make this work and etc. And as a teacher or a trainer, we have to recognise, don't we, that you're going to be doing a training session when somebody's cat might walk by or their kid might, and there's something about just recognising that's just how it's going to be in future, isn't it? Is that we do this, but also how much can we support people to kind of get around that? So we did the training that we did. A woman was doing the training, but next to her was her son, who's older, and he was clearly in sales, and he was having a conversation about selling something, and we could all hear it. I mean, fortunately, it wasn't confidential and didn't matter, but there was something about how could we support her to do that and make it easier for us. And so it's something about, do you need to get some headphones, or can you move your laptop to somewhere, and even if you do have to sit up in bed and stuff like that and do it. And there is something about how do you do that. I mean, but on the other extreme, I think there are people like myself who it's just me here and my partner, and he's upstairs in his office because we're both home workers. And if we're not careful, we just sit in our office all day and we don't talk to each other. So for me, that thing about, and Suzanne covered this in her video, didn't she, about that just doing something. So I will say, do you want a cup of tea? Should we go and sit in the garden or something? So I think, just... make it work for you. Think about your situation, how it works for you. But having said that, this is the other thing that I do think is that one of the things that's thrown up for me is I realised actually how privileged I am. And I think let's not forget that some of us, that we're not all in this together. For some of us, it's a whole lot easier, isn't it, than for others, and to do that. And
we hear that a lot, don't we? We hear that, we're all in the same boat, and we actually aren't. We're not all in the same boat. We're all going through the same crisis, but our boats are probably very different depending on our lifestyle and who we're with. And I've been saying that as well. I've been saying to many people I've been talking to that I just feel so grateful that I can still put food on the table, that I still have a roof over my head, that I'm very fortunate I've got an outside space, I've got a garden that I can walk into. I can still go to the shops because, I'm not a vulnerable person. I can still go and buy my own food. I can still go out for a walk. And I live near quite a lot of fields, so I can get away from people. And I think it's things like that we take for granted every day, that certainly myself and a lot of people that I've spoken to, we've all agreed, actually, we've now realised how privileged we are, that all of those things are in place. And, many of us will have other things going on in the background. I've got two elderly parents, for example, and one of them is particularly vulnerable because he's going into dialysis 3 times a week. You don't know the other bit behind people either. And I think in all of that, what I've taken from it is don't make assumptions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't want to say be kind, because everyone's using that as a catchphrase, but be understanding of what other people might be going through. Just because they don't want to tell you what's going on doesn't mean that there's nothing going on, does there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and that's really key, isn't it? It's like this whole thing, isn't it, about that women are so much, if they're in abusive relationships, this is a particularly dangerous time. So we don't know what's happening in other people's lives, do we? And I think there's something about, count your own blessings and recognise, what you have in your life. but don't make assumptions about other people's, really, and have that kind of understanding and
Okay, so
if we were that people are going to respond to this in different ways. Sorry.
No, I didn't. There you go. I
just
butted in.
Connectivity there.
I was just coming to that point where I was thinking, okay, so what would be our kind of things that we would leave people with from this conversation? And a couple, I guess, for me that I've heard is make it right for you in your situation. And from my point of view, be understanding that just because you're not in that situation, somebody else might be. What would you like to leave people with?
Well, I guess, that if you to stand and reflect upon, as I said, what works for you. I think the other thing that we've kind of touched on, which is the connectedness, that stay in touch with people, check up on people, make sure that you don't use it as a time to kind of reach out, really, and just sort of say, how are you, how are things? And the other thing, is about that kind of, sounds corny, but it's the small pleasures, isn't it? And the small happy blessings, really. And one of the things I've been doing, which has given me a great deal of pleasure, and it sounds a bit corny, but is we go for our, an hour's walk, and I've discovered some really lovely places where I live to walk. But one of the things I do is I take my phone with me, and I try and throughout much to my partner's annoyance, I should say, but I try and find something to photograph every time I go for a walk that I notice that it just makes me kind of smile. And it could be that it just it could just be the spring flowers. It could be a particularly lovely lane or something. And then, just because it makes me feel good, and it might be boring everybody else, but, I just stick it on Instagram as, this was the lovely thing I saw today. Because I just think it's those small things, and it just, I suppose taking my phone with me has enabled me to kind of, has made me look around more, and has made me appreciate those things. And I think that's part of the kind of pausing and reflecting, isn't it? What are things that make me happy these days,
And for some people, it could be sort of writing something down each day, or recording something, or there could be lots of ways of doing that, couldn't there?
Yeah, I've had friends who we've done a thing where we exchange poems, I talk with my sisters more about what we're reading at the moment. So it's just having those kind of conversations about
I've got a LinkedIn thing going at the moment for 30 days. I started the 1st of April, so we're on the 23rd day, and that's a kind of gratitude calendar. And so each day we've been saying it gives you what that day is. So for example, today was tradition, I think it was, and so it's quite nice to look at that and go, oh yeah, okay, what is that thing that I like? So there's quite a lot of those sorts of things going on as well, which is quite nice too. Okay, thank you for joining me. Hopefully, if you've valued what we've been talking about and it's interested you today, you can click on the link that you're about to see that's going to come on the screen, and pop a penny on the pot towards our charity, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Goodbye. Bye, Kathryn.
Thanks, Lainy. Bye.